Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Deep Dive Discography Podcast. I am me, he is him. Welcome, everyone, to Talking About Talks. Hi, Marcus. How are you?
I am doing very well. Thank you very kindly. How are you doing today, Aaron?
I'm good. It's a bit early.
It is
It's
a bit
too
early.
early.
It's in my time zone. It's very early, and it's
Yeah,
a Saturday morning, and I have adjusted to a work schedule, so I was up way earlier than I would have liked to be, but here we are now. So
here we are. I mean, we're going to start this off the way that you're supposed to start off videos, which is if you're watching this on YouTube, subscribe to the channel and like the fucking video.
mm-hmm.
And if you're not on our YouTube, go subscribe to our YouTube.
That's right. Go subscribe to everything we do. Give us money monthly on our Patreon.
Yeah, we're starting with this shit.
Yeah, usually we do it at the end, but
Anyways,
we figure most people don't get that far, so we better plug nice and early.
they get sick of us early.
Yeah, exactly. You'll know if you're invested pretty quickly.
Yeah.
What
Anyways,
you see is what you get.
we're talking about a band that is notorious. I don't know
Mm-hmm.
what's the right word. They're not really controversial, but kind of.
Infamous.
They're infamous. Yeah,
Maybe
they were
on a more
controversial for the time.
maybe on a more personal level than a musical level. I don't think their music's very controversial
Controversial.
or daring or challenging, but
Yeah, talk about Motley Crue, a band that is well known for being glam, but they didn't really start out glam.
no, they did not. How would you describe this first album, Too Fast for Love?
It's just a classic heavy metal record, really.
Yeah, I would probably agree with that.
I mean, it kicked them off right. Livewire was a big hit when it came out, and outside of that, I don't know. One of the biggest things with Motley Crue is they have like a good song or two per album, and then the
Mm-hmm.
rest of the album just kind of is there.
I think it depends on what exactly we're talking about here because I think the first couple albums are pretty consistent, but I think yeah, their later stuff is just total trash. um,
Yeah,
but I think for the most part, this band earned their stripes pretty early on. Like this first record is actually pretty cool, and like I haven't listened to it. God knows how long. Quite honestly, it's been many eons since I ever put it on, but yeah, man. I mean, like it's pretty sweet. I was really happy to go back and actually listen to it and found out that I really liked it.
did you know Slash was originally going to be in Motley?
That would have been cool.
I mean, it's not that surprising, but yeah,
But he's
yeah.
a
I if I remember right, it was like the whole issue was he was just a bit too young because he's a bit younger
mm,
than the rest of the guys.
well, thank God that worked out the way it did because it would be a total shame if Slash wasted those awesome riffs on Motley Crue. Like, could you imagine like if Rocket Queen was recorded with like Vince Neil's vocals instead of Axel's? That's like some weird
November Rain.
alternate universe. Yeah, yeah. Could you imagine that? That's almost
I
as
don't
weird
want
as
to.
like Slash supposedly wanting to join Megadeth. That would have been equally strange.
I would have been for that.
That could have been pretty cool, albeit
But
short
yeah,
lived. You know.
yeah. I mean, like Livewire, it got really big MTV recognition, which is kind of how Motley kicked off and got as big as they did so quickly.
Yeah.
Public Enemy #1. I feel like if they released that on the second album, it would have made more sense. Does that
Yeah.
make sense?
Yeah.
Like
Well.
they they gained that notoriety of being kind of whatever, like being bad boys pretty quickly.
Yeah. Well, can't you
But
tell by that album cover? It's a man's crotch.
it is a man's crotch.
You know my thing about this particular era of music that I didn't really realize until I was a much older adult is that like too much of the the boomer era rock bands way too horny.
I know.
Way too horny all the time. Like every song is ostensibly about doing blow and fucking.
Yeah, that wasn't so much the case on this album.
No, I guess not. That's actually a
Like
fair point. Yeah.
sex, drugs, and rock and roll became the motto like three albums in, I think. But this one was all just rock and roll and live fast.
You know what it is though? It's like whenever a rock musician says rock, that's like a synonym for sex, isn't it?
Maybe, maybe.
Like you can take any rock lyric where it's like, "Hey, I'm gonna rock you tonight." I think we all know what they mean when they say
Yeah,
"rock you tonight."
yeah.
So
You're
when
not
Motley
wrong.
Crue wants to rock, that's code. So,
Code.
but yeah, I think this
Yeah, I
album
mean,
is pretty good. I think
yeah,
really good performance by Mick Mars. I kind of forgot like Mick Mars actually shreds.
yeah.
It's been so long since I listened to Motley Crue that I actually forgot that, and I also kind of forgot that Tommy Lee is actually like a really good drummer.
He
Um,
is.
I find the weakest link in this band is generally their lyrics, and I think Nikki Sixx, albeit Nikki Sixx is actually a really good songwriter, at least in this particular era.
Yeah, he's definitely a really good songwriter. He does a good job at, laying down like just a bass line, a simple rhythm,
Mm-hmm.
while everyone else does their thing. So, and I mean, when you consider all the like pretty much all the lyrics and music is all written by Nikki Sixx.
Yeah, it's pretty much all Nikki Sixx, which actually I didn't know for the longest time that he was such a important part of this band. But yeah, the Motley Crue
Yeah,
sound is his riff style, and like he had some pretty good riffs, man. Some really good
and
stuff in here.
yeah, and that's like later on when the lineup changes a little bit, the music doesn't change that much.
It
It does change. It definitely does change, but it doesn't change that much because the main songwriter's still there the whole time.
Motley Crue is a good example of a band that's been a victim of its time. Um,
Yeah,
I think, in earnest, most rock bands and like metal bands that kind of started from like that late '70s, early '80s era, had way too many hiccups in the '90s and the 2000s to really cement themselves as truly great bands. But I think Motley Crue is a great example of that. Like their early stuff, their first, I'd say, 5 albums are really, really good, really consistent. But man, once you get into the '90s, you're just in the fucking wild west of, of sounds.
yeah,
It's amazing though how this genre of music was so popular in its time. It obviously has a lasting impact because we're talking about them now. They still play now. Young people love it. Or I say young people love it, but let me phrase that like young people sometimes will go back and check out these bands. But when it was the '90s, everyone got really heady and had a huge trip. And they started getting self-conscious about what they were, so they started like, going alternative and not in a cool
yeah.
way because as it would turn out, Motley Crue are bad boys, but they're certainly not punks, which is to say they certainly are not pioneers of alternative culture. Um,
Yeah,
yeah, they were
yeah.
always
Like,
pop centric musicians, and it's very apparent later on in this discography that they are not good at counterculture. Their stuff is very safe, which is fine. That's not a knock against what they do.
yeah. I guess it depends on how you class safe because obviously early on a lot of stuff is influenced by the punk that was out at the time. They're notorious for being on the what was it, the Dirty 15 or whatever, Tipper Gore's list
Yeah, yeah.
of shit that's like you can't do this. This is bad and it's bad for our children. Um, I mean, the second album, "Shout at the Devil," has the backwards messages. If you play the record
Oh,
backwards,
I actually didn't know about that.
yeah,
That's
yeah,
funny.
it has Nikki Sixx and Tommy Lee chanting "Jesus is Satan."
That's actually pretty funny. I respect that.
They also covered "Helter Skelter."
Oh, I actually forgot about that.
It's not a bad cover.
That's not on the original version of this album, is it?
Well, on "Shout at the Devil," sorry.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I wasn't sure if we are still talking about Too Fast for Love. Okay, so here's the thing about
No,
Too
we
Fast to
moved
Love. I
on.
don't want to get too sidetracked here. Yeah, really consistent album. Like again, more in the heavy metal style. Really good guitar solos. Really good riffage. Tommy Lee or Vince Neil's voice is not grating at this point. I think he really lays it down pretty well. Some cringy lyrics, but that's to be expected. Really pleasantly surprised going back to this record. Honestly, I kind of forgot this is what the album was, and it's pretty sweet.
Yeah.
As far as
Yeah,
debuts
there's
go, it's probably one of the better ones of this genre.
yeah, I think when it comes to everything that goes on around this band. I mean, Too Fast for Love, it was a very simple start. They're out of Hollywood. It's kind of what you would expect this day and age for something out of Hollywood in the 80s to sound like.
Yeah, I think
Um,
so, but I think it's a little bit better than that. Honestly, I think they actually are a bit of a cut above the rest. Like I'll take this over like the L.A. Guns albums any day of the week.
yeah, I just mean like this day and age, in 2022,
Yeah,
this is the sound you think of. And it's obviously famous for that. This is they kind of set the standard.
yeah, absolutely. I find this is the sound of Motley Crue that I actually forget existed because when I think of them, I think of kind of like the girls kind
Yeah.
of sound onwards, right? So I kind of forgot that like these first two records are a little bit different, a little bit more heavy metal than glam. But it's edging in that direction for sure.
Yeah, like obviously you can see it a lot on the alternate cover for Shout at the Devil.
Yeah,
That this is a glam. This is glam-ish, glam adjacent, as you would say.
yeah. I would
Um,
say that.
I mean, there's some fun stuff that goes on in later on in their history, like with Shout at the Devil, the Motley Crue went out supporting Kiss and got kicked off the tour.
Why? I didn't know about
Or
this.
yeah, so they were on the Creatures of the Night tour and they got kicked off after 5 shows because they were just too rowdy.
That's so epic. See, it's so funny that a band like Kiss has like that kind of that like had a bit of a litmus test where it's like, man, I can't believe if you're too ratty to hang out with Gene Simmons, he must be a real prick.
Yeah,
There's no way you're a
yeah,
very nice fella if that's how it went down. Here's the thing about
yeah. Like
real quick before we move on. I got to say, Too Fast for Love, really strong start. I think a little front loaded. I don't know if
yeah,
I really care for the second half as much. I don't think it's bad. Just all the good songs are on the front, but I think that's kind of just the way a lot of these records were made back then. Because obviously, if you think about a vinyl, you have A side, B
yeah,
side. They literally just put the good stuff on the first half because if you think about like drunk people at a party, they might forget to flip records.
yeah. That is one thing you gotta remember when you go back to early records. A sides will always be what is considered to be the stronger songs because of exactly that. People just are lazy.
Yeah, and they were too much of cavemen to to figure out how to put like that much data on a small disk. So there you go.
Wild to think about, isn't it?
It's pretty wild. Do you like Shout at the Devil? I think it's pretty good too.
I think Shout at the Devil is better than Too Fast for Love.
For me, it's about
I
honestly kind of the same. I don't think
I
one's
think
particularly
they
better.
really honed that sound
Yeah.
is the main thing. Um, yeah, I mean, this is where things went downhill personally for like the members.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Nikki Sixx started to get addicted to heroin at this point. Mick Mars, this was around the point where he figured out that he was ill. Obviously, you have the whole bad behavior getting kicked off the tour with Kiss.
What's it about his
Uh,
illness? I actually don't know too much about the guy.
I don't remember what his illness is even called
It's like
at
a
this point.
condition.
Yeah, yeah, it's like a bone condition if I remember
Oh.
right. I mean, he's managed to continue going. They considered kicking him out at one point,
Mm-hmm.
but they just kind of worked around it.
Oh, I see. I was gonna say that
I
kind of
mean,
explains every time I've ever seen Motley Crue live. He looks a little bit more decrepit and a little bit more laid
yeah,
back than the rest of them. Whereas like Nikki
yeah,
Sixx has aged much better, for example.
yeah. Nikki Six and Tommy have definitely aged the best. Tommy still looks like a fucking like 19-year-old.
He looks a little young. Yeah, I wonder if it's like Botox or I don't know what's going on with that. Like maybe all that
Well,
double
it's
work has
definitely
paid
not a
off.
lack of drug use.
Yeah, yeah. You think dating Pamela Anderson and going to jail for domestic abuse would have been enough to age the guy, but
Yeah, but I mean, you can say the
you never
same about
know.
Nikki Sixx. You'd think dying twice would.
No, if anything, that kick started his heart, man. He was just like he died twice, and he
Haha,
was like, "I'm
kickstart my
invincible."
heart.
Yeah, fuck yeah, I'm gonna work out every day. Anyways, yeah, shout out the Devil. Pretty good album. I think the title track is like I don't want to say a little overplayed because well, it's just a little overplayed. I think I've heard that song too many times. Famously, I heard
Yeah.
it on Guitar Hero 2, if I'm not
Yep.
mistaken, and I've
Yep.
played a lot of Guitar Hero 2 in my time, fellas.
Same.
Very very good game. Yeah, I think to me, like I was saying earlier, this album has a very similar quality. Like you said, it's a little bit more honed in directionally, a little bit less of a straight up heavy metal release, but I think it's fine, all things considered. I don't think anything that
Yeah.
happens on here is particularly shocking in the context of this band's discography. I like it a lot
Yeah.
more than let's say Theater of Pain.
Yeah. I mean, Shout Out the Devil, obviously, like you said, it's a little bit overplayed. It's probably the most overplayed of the first two albums.
Mm-hmm.
Looks Like Kill's a great song. That is also on Guitar Hero or Rock Band somewhere.
Oh, I didn't know about
Yeah,
that actually. Okay,
yeah, you got Helter Skelter, the Beatles cover. I mean,
I think I'm
it's a
back to
good
that one.
song. It works as a more metal song as well.
Yeah,
So I'm not gonna complain too much there. Again, you gotta look at the time. Everything was on vinyl. That was the only way to listen to anything really. So it is very front heavy.
it's a little front
I
heavy.
do think Too Young to Fall in Love is pretty decent,
I actually
and
love
Knock 'Em
that
Dead
song.
Kid.
I think Too Young to Fall in Love is really sick, and that's actually something I wanted to bring up too. Is like Motley Crue has this really cool sense of melodicism when they do play riffs that are like a little bit less rock and roll, a little bit more like implying chord progressions. Too Young to Fall in Love, really, really well written stuff. I think the riff is
Yeah,
very catchy. It's very iconic. I really like that particular sound where it's like halfway between like a straight up mid tempo rock song, but a little bit of like that ballad style melodicism. A little bit more in depth with the chord progressions, and I think that's really
yeah,
cool. Really simple, but like really effective, I think.
yeah. It like honestly, Too Young to Fall in Love is probably the best riff on this entire album.
Pretty good. It's really good.
Like it's one of those ones that'll just stick with you, even if you don't think you've heard the song. You've heard the song.
I kind of forgot about listening to these first two albums. I kind of forgot that like Tommy Lee has some pretty decent double kick chops, and man, his
Yeah,
fills are really sweet. I think this album is just like continuation of his drumming style from from the first record rather. I kind of forgot he does a lot of that stuff because he kind of abandoned it in more of the poppy or crew stuff. Like if you think about like Doctor Feelgood drumming style or even Theater of Pain, way less double kick, way more like straight up rock drumming, albeit with exceptional fills and like really good feel. But I kind of like how he had a bit more of a heavy metal approach.
yeah, yeah. It
That
is
little bit
definitely
of
much more.
that little bit of extremity gives like Motley Crue just a tiny bit of edge to make their music a little bit more interesting. I
Yeah,
think.
yeah. It's the same thing. Like the fun riffs and stuff like that. Like you do get a little bit of that here and there, but not a huge amount. It becomes much more about the image of the band and less about the music. And when it is about the music, it's more about Vince Neil later on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But this was back when everyone in the band had their own sound and everyone got to show it off.
Yeah. He had a
Like,
really good
you know,
collection of charisma and like definitive characteristics, I think.
mhm.
Really good lineup with a lot of chemistry, I think.
Yeah, like, if you look at Shout at the Devil and Looks Like Kill, well, Shout at the Devil, I like the riff on that, but that is much more of a Vince Neil song. It's much more about the singing, the vocals, and lyrics.
Mm-hmm.
Looks Like Kill kind of goes a bit more of an into that like heavy metal extremity. Arguably, much more of a Tommy song. Too Young to Fall in Love is more of a guitar song.
Yeah.
Like you can see it as you look through the songs that it's just depending on what song you pick in these early albums, you can figure out whose song it is and who it was written for.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's a good hallmark of songwriting is understanding your members and their strong suits and knowing when to, incorporate something and when to leave something out of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I'm done talking about Shout Out the Devil. I think it's a very competent record.
Yep.
I probably would go back to the first record first before Shout Out the Devil, but I mean, like, there's some good cuts on here. It's really fun.
And then Vince Neil killed a guy.
Oh, was that between this album? Oh, that explains
Yeah.
why Theater of Pain is kind of not good.
So yeah, going into Theater of Pain, they're coming off of Vince Neil's arrest for manslaughter while driving drunk.
With the
Do you
guitar
know the
player of, oh God, it was a really good band. The guitar player of,
only released one album?
it wasn't Red Beach,
And
was it?
nope, nope. Michael Monroe still exists. He's still doing stuff.
Fuck. It wasn't the winger guy. Oh God, who was it?
Also, it wasn't a guitar player, was it? It was a drummer.
Oh, was it? Oh, my
I think
bad.
so.
I sort of got
Now
it
I'm
was the
remembering.
guitar player. Who
No, I
was it
need to
again?
check. Hanoi Rocks.
Oh yeah, Hanaway Rocks. That sucks. Yeah, what an asshole.
Yeah, drummer. I was right. Cool.
Yeah, so Vince
Yeah,
Neil killed a guy.
Vince Neil killed a guy. This also marks around the time, if I remember right, that the Heroin Diary starts.
Hmm.
But if you've not read the Heroin Diaries, it is a very interesting look into the brain of an addict.
No, actually, I haven't read that one, but I'll take your word for it. So here's my thing about. So I have this weird way of like looking at this, right? When I think of L.A. rock music scene, especially of this time, I think a lot of Bret Michaels,
Yep.
Nikki Sixx, but not their old school incarnates, the 2000s version. I think a lot of like traditional style tattoos, affliction jeans, really weird bandanas and wrist accessories. I
And a
feel
cowboy hat.
the cowboy hat, the weird like urban cowboy fucking thing, like the David Vincent, the Nikki Sixxes, the Bret Michaels. Now, however, this album obviously came out in the 80s, mid 80s.
Yep.
Those isms are in here.
Yeah.
Like even band like Guns N' Roses plays into this in their later years and stuff like that. We have songs on this album like Home Sweet Home, which I can really do without. Smoking in the Boys' Room. We're kind of going towards that really lamification of rock music. Like, I have a hot take. I used to really like 80s rock and metal when I was a younger lad. I don't care about that anymore. I think the 80s kind of sucked. Honestly, I think every genre that existed in the 70s that carried over in the 80s, I just prefer the 70s version of it. And I think one thing I noticed is that like 80s music to me, to my ears these days, sounds like if I was 13 years old and I want to picture what a cool rocker was, I would imagine the LA rock scene. Because
Yeah.
my taste is undeveloped. Is kind of what I'm saying. So it's cringy when adults do this. Smoking in the Boys' Room, written from 20-something-year-old men, doesn't hit very good. It's stupid. It's really lame, and quite frankly, it's a stupid song. I never liked this song. I think this is the lamest record of Motley Crue of this era.
Yeah. Would you like to know how old Nikki Sixx was when this album came out?
Probably 25.
27.
Whack.
I mean, have you listened to the Brownsville Station version of Smoking in the Boys' Room?
The Who version, sorry?
Brownsville Station, the original.
No, actually, I haven't. I don't know what that is.
Oh, well, yeah. Smoking in the Boys' Room's a cover, in case you didn't know that.
I actually did not know that. It's interesting.
So there you go.
Cool, cool.
Yeah, I prefer Motley's version.
Oh, that's
It
not
was,
a good place to start then.
yeah, it like Brownsville Station were just a pretty whatever, like one hit wonder rock band from the 70s, 60s, really.
Okay.
But yeah, um, I mean, "Smoke in the Boys Room." It's a song. It exists. I prefer Motley's version. I don't mind the song. I'll turn it on every once in a while, but it's definitely not something I turn on quite often. Home Sweet
Yeah.
Home. If I want to listen to a ballad, there are so many better ballads than Home Sweet Home.
Yeah, especially even at its time, dude. Like, I'm not a ballad guy, but like, fuck this song, dude. This song, again, is the lamification of rock music, where it's like, if I had to imagine like someone having a really bad drunken cocaine cry, I would imagine this song.
Bad Heroin Cry.
Yeah, someone after like
Because
a really late night of bad partying, where a bunch of drama ensues. You go home and you put on this Crew record and you down a bunch of Jack on your couch watching Aqua Teen Hunger Force or something. Just awful. Fuck this song. Fuck this album. This album sucks. You know what I think about this album is too? This album is like a real fucking snooze fest, which is a really big shame considering it came
Mhm.
off of two really well done, really consistent records. And I remember when I was listening to this album, I was driving home from work last week and I was like, man, I cannot wait for this to be over. If you thought the first two albums were front loaded, boy, you're in for a real treat because these B sides are kind of stinkers.
Yeah, there's a reason they don't play any of them live. There's a
Use
reason nobody can name the B sides.
They're also really lame too. Use it or lose it, save our souls, raise your hands to rock, and fight for your rights. And I really hate that like Motley Crue had the balls to have a song called "Fight for Your Rights." I never ever want to hear politics from Motley Crue. I'm not one of those people who will say bands should keep out of politics. I think every person's entitled to their political views at any given time and place, regardless of career. But fuck you, Motley Crue. I do never want to hear the Crew talk about rights, considering like they're a bunch of dysfunctional drug addict womanizers. I think that's fucking hilarious.
Yeah. Yeah, the fact that they name drop Martin Luther King in that song as well.
Fuck you. That's all I could say about that. Let me pull up these lyrics. God, what a
The
fucking terrible album.
I mean, my last note about this album, because yeah, it's a very meh album. I don't understand the love it gets really, but my the biggest thing that annoys me is obviously going into this album, you had the whole Vince Neil thing,
Yeah,
killing Razzle from Hanoi Rocks, and because Motley Crue was so fucking big and had so much money at this time, he served no time in prison.
yeah. Then you get bailed out.
Yeah,
I'm pretty sure someone threw a shitload of money at it
yeah,
and just made the problem go
yeah.
away.
The because their manager at the time, that was basically his job, was just throw money at all problems.
Yeah,
Like Motley, it is one thing that I will give Nikki Sixx. He does talk about this in the Heroin Diaries. Motley Crue's biggest problem is they never had to grow up
right.
because they had a manager and a record label who knew that Motley Crue were bringing in so much money that if they just throw money at every problem that Motley Crue cause and they never get in trouble, they'll keep releasing albums and the label will keep making a ton of money.
Yeah, here's the thing, man. Is like that manager, he really earned his fucking salary.
Oh yeah, you have so
So
much
many
stuff.
problems.
Like they rented out a whole floor of like one of the most expensive hotels in
Yep.
LA.
Trashed it.
They trashed it. They had like girls running around naked from room to room and guys running around naked from room to room, and it yeah, stuff like TVs ripped out of walls and thrown out of the windows, and there was so much like, but at least looking back on it, Nikki is able to acknowledge that it's like, yeah, we should have been told to like calm the fuck down, basically.
That wouldn't have worked though. That wouldn't have worked because they were
It would
glorified for
have.
being jerks. I don't know, man. I wonder. I mean, maybe in an alternate
Like
universe, but like,
I'm not saying it would have worked to a great extent. I'm saying like Vince Neil should have ended up in prison and they should
mm,
have changed singers earlier. If that happened, maybe Nicky wouldn't have ended up with the massive heroin addiction that he ended up with because he was dealing with all that stuff.
I don't know. I don't know,
Maybe
man.
Tommy wouldn't have ended up being a raging alcoholic and also addicted to heroin. There's a lot of stuff that could have changed if they were actually held accountable for some of the stuff that they did.
And I think the problem is
Like,
too is like a lot of this culture surrounding rock music. I thought about this a lot because I think it was last year. This is kind of a weird side tangent, but it kind of ties in here. I watched Almost Famous for the first time. Ever seen that film?
nope.
So for those who aren't initiated, that's a movie where it's basically about this young kid who really wants to get into rock and roll journalism, writing for a magazine. So he basically follows this fictional rock band on tour and he meets up with this teenage groupie and stuff like that. And what I gathered from this film and just kind of like from retrospection was like, yeah, man, like rock music has a really, really nasty problem of glorifying just hedonism in its
Oh
worst
yeah,
possible way, where it's like there's this idea, this cultural mythos of the rock and roll lifestyle, which is like sex, drugs, rock and roll, living free, almost like everyone's trying to pretend to be a fucking outlaw. And it's like I almost wonder if immature Nikki Six would have heed any warnings, right? Someone could have told him like, "Hey man, you're really fucking this up. You could really get hurt." He'd probably say, he'd be like, "Fuck you, man. You don't know me. You don't know what I've been through." Just kind of like self-indulgent, and that's the issue I think I have with these people on a personal level is that are incredibly self-indulgent. They're incredibly
yeah,
egotistical, man babies. Really, just generally gross behavior. So I don't know, man. Maybe
yeah,
maybe you're right that like if someone stepped in and held them accountable, possibly. But I mean, plenty of people have been held accountable and they have, you know, repeat patterns of behavior, right? Like look at Varg
yeah.
from Mayhem. He's huge
Hmm.
shitlord. He's never stopped being a shitlord. Terrible,
No, but he
terrible
stopped killing
person.
people
I
and he
know, and
stopped burning down churches.
I mean, yeah, but he also got arrested with having a bunch of guns in the trunk of his car.
Yeah, he also got arrested on suspicion of a potential terrorist attack. So, anyways,
Yeah, that's a side tangent. Yeah,
so girls, girls, girls.
much better album.
It's an alright album.
I like it more than Theater of
It's
Pain by quite a bit.
yeah, it actually has a couple decent songs on it. It also has an Elvis Presley cover, which is weird.
I actually didn't know that
I
was
mean,
a
not
cover.
that real weird actually,
Yeah, that's what you'd
but yeah,
expect from an album in this
yeah.
era.
This album, there's one really weird part to this for me. So you kick off with Wild Side, which is obviously just literally sex, drugs, and rock and roll. The song, followed by Girls, 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 which is sex, drugs, and rock and roll. The song, but the end of the A side is Nona, which is a song that Nikki Sixx wrote for his grandma when she passed away.
Hmm.
That seems
Sorry,
very weird to
sorry,
have.
I had nothing to say to that. But yeah, I mean, it's a little weird considering that could have been a B-side song. Dude, I actually forgot about it. That's how little of an impression that song made on me, honestly.
It's I mean it is what you would class as a self-indulgent song. It's a minute 30 and just kind of there to for him.
Yeah, yeah,
But
yeah.
yeah.
I think this album to me is kind of the start of the Motley Crue sound that we all really know. I think Theater of Pain had sprinkles of the Motley Crueisms. I think this is like where Motley Crue, the way I know them, really starts. Like songs like
Yeah.
Wild Side and Girls, 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 You're All I Need. That to me is like quintessential era Crue. But you might notice something about the date of this album, 87, which means bad times are coming in pretty quick. This band is
Yeah.
getting pretty close to careening off a cliff. So, you know,
Yeah, and not elegantly.
no, no, I cannot wait till we get there.
I cannot wait.
I think Girls, Girls, Girls is a pretty solid record. Really good performances for the most part. But I mean, like, yeah, the whole sex, drugs, rock and roll thing, fucking cringe. This album cover is cringe. But
Yeah,
I mean, it's good music, but I
it's
mean, like, it's really stupid. It's very, very stupid.
yeah, yeah.
Very lame.
It's got a song about strippers. I mean,
It's aged.
cool, man.
It's aged incredibly poorly. It's aged like fucking stale cheese, just left on the counter.
Yeah,
I have no desire to ever go back to this album ever again, albeit I think it's pretty okay. Like, if someone were to put this on at a party, wouldn't complain, wouldn't even acknowledge it. I would just keep on just
keep
mingling.
on keeping on.
Yeah, just keep on keeping on.
And then Doctor Feelgood.
I like Dr. Feelgood quite a bit. I think it's really, really good. You know, the thing about Dr. Feelgood, what I noticed is I feel like Motley Crue must have heard Appetite for Destruction and said, God, that's a really good idea. And so they took a
Yeah,
lot of like the really tight, clean production style and riffage style that you would have heard on Appetite for Destruction. Really, really good guitar work on this record, I think.
side note. Okay, so to be fair, Appetite for Destruction came out around the same time as Girls, Girls, Girls.
Yeah.
GNR went out on tour with Motley Crue. They were obviously all very close, although even the Motley guys were like, "Hey, Axl Rose is an asshole."
Yeah, that sounds about
One
right.
one fun fact that I learned from the Heroin Diaries: Slash likes to get very very drunk and pass out and piss himself in leather pants, and he still does it to this day apparently.
I actually didn't know he still drank.
Yeah, yeah. Apparently, when he drinks, he does not just have a drink. He drinks to get drunk and then pisses himself in leather pants.
You know what someone once told me many years ago? It's not about being fucked up, it's about getting fucked up. Someone should have probably told that to Slash. That sucks.
That that sounds like the kind of motto that Motley Crue would have had.
You know, man, that's actually really sad that Slash is notorious for pissing his leather pants. That can't be comfortable. It must have smelled terrible. Could you
In
imagine how
leather
much
pants.
chafing
Imagine trying to get out of leather pants
soaked in
after pissing
piss?
yourself.
Dude, you know the worst part is it would have been stale urine.
Yeah.
Just overnight stale
Overnight, mixed in
fucking
with your like sweat from coming off the stage.
countless fucking cigarette burns. Gross. Just
And who
gross,
knows what
dude.
else. So yeah, Dr. Feelgood.
I like this album a
Uh,
lot. I think it's very good. I think it's very, very well written. Um, I think as far as their albums go, this might be the most consistent one.
yeah.
I don't think the second half falls on its face like the other ones do.
Yeah, this was around the point that CDs were starting, if I
Yeah,
remember right.
you can tell because
So,
the track listing isn't organized by A and B side.
yeah. There's a lot of weird like references through this one.
How so?
So Don't Go Away, Magic Go Away. It refers back to Too Young to Fall in Love, funny enough.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Uh, the TNT, Terror in Tinseltown,
Yeah.
it has the same sample used as Eyes of a Stranger by Queensryche,
Oh, interesting.
which is a thing. Slice Your Pie is based off of She's So Heavy from the Beatles.
Did not know that.
And it wasn't really known until much more recently, but Steven Tyler and Brian Adams are on this album.
Really?
Yeah,
Whereabouts?
they're backing vocals on Sticky Sweet.
What the fuck? I had no idea. That's so funny.
There's a lot of weird things to this album.
Yeah.
But yeah, this was Motley Crue trying to be Motley Crue. This was like pinnacle Motley Crue that everybody knows.
I think it's definitely peak.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely peak Motley Crue.
Like I
Um
said, I think the first two albums are better still,
yeah, I could see that.
specifically the second album.
I
But
think sorry, go ahead.
yeah, this is where the cliff appears.
Yeah, I think yeah, this is like, you know what this is? This is the part of the space mission when you get to the moon and you're like, "Damn, this is really good." But you forget the part where you have to go back home. And you realize, "Oh crap. We have a long way to go." Yeah,
We gotta get back.
yeah, we got to get back, and that's not going to be easy. Yeah, dude, I think the hooks on this album are really well developed. And that's kind of the reason I like it, is that I actually remember the hooks on pretty much most of these songs. I have a vivid memory of a lot of them. There's some songs I actually kind of forget about until I look back now. Like, I forgot She Goes Down, but I mean, I don't need to go back to it. Time for Change, I completely forgot was a song, but I mean, these first 9 songs, I have a bit more of a vivid memory on, which is a lot to say considering that the other albums did not stick with me
Yeah,
nearly as much. I think the production's great. It's a Bob Rock joint, so I think he's a very
good old Bob
talented
Rock.
producer. Yeah, yeah, he's good, man. He had some really
He
good
is.
albums under his belt.
He is. He's Canadian, in case you didn't know.
Did not know that.
There you go.
Yeah, dude, I really like this album. I think it takes the influence from a lot of good places, and it really does make up for Theater of Pain being just total ass. You know, I forgot to
Yeah.
actually ask you several albums ago when we were talking about Theater of Pain. I remember you said that like there's a bunch of love for that album. Who says that? I've never heard people talk about that album. I just heard people talk about the singles.
Oh, like bring up Theater of Pain because like that's the thing is everyone knows those two singles,
Oh, I see.
and therefore based on that the album's great. Bring up
I
that
see what you're
album, everyone
saying.
will tell you that they love it,
Oh,
and
because
then
yeah,
ask them to name a song that's not those two songs, and they won't.
right, right. Do you think
That's kind of it.
Doctor Feelgood has the same issue?
I think it has the same issue for a lot of people where it is just they know Kickstart Your Heart and Dr. Feelgood. I think it has more good songs
Yeah,
as a whole, but like I mean, Kickstart My Heart is just it's Motley Crue. There's no part of that song that doesn't just scream it could be on any other album.
yeah. But part of it too is like this album to me is one of those rare albums where every song is a potential single.
Yeah, and
It's
most of
like
them were singles.
it really is their version of like a of an Appetite for Destruction, where every song's just a fucking banger.
Yeah,
Yeah, this album's great. I think the low point for me actually, Without You, I can do without. Not a fan of the Crew ballads.
so you pointed out that this album is kind of like going to the moon and then realizing you have to go back.
Mm-hmm.
There's an extra step you can add to that.
Let's hear
This album's like going to the moon, realizing you have to go back, and then realizing that your engineer fucked off.
it. Oh, you don't say.
Because this was the last album until, well, not for very long, but this is the last album with Vince Neil.
Yep.
And then John Corabi came in. Okay, so
Yeah. Let's hear it. This album
okay,
sucks.
right? I'm not saying this is a good album. I'm not saying that the self-titled album is great. I'm not saying it's better than anything else. But I will give it some very well deserved love. John Corabi's a good vocalist.
Yeah.
He can't do Vince Neil.
Yes.
On top of that, John Corabi brought is also a guitarist. So this is the only album that has both a lead and rhythm guitar.
Interesting. Did not know that.
And then he also plays 6-string bass on it.
Yeah, really talented guy, but you know what it is, dude? It's like no matter how talented your musicianship is, you jumped in the wrong era.
Yeah, he
Like
really
literally,
did.
if you replace Vince Neil, like for Theater of Pain, I think the result would have been pretty similar. I think it would have been an equally competent album. Um, yeah, dude, I think this album fucking sucks. I think this album is literally just like sad, pathetic LA rockisms. I think pathetic is
Yeah.
a really good way to describe it. You know, as earlier when I was talking about smoking in the boys' room, it makes me think of like Affliction shirts, bootcut jeans, leather wrist accessories. This album sounds like the background music to like Rock of Love, where it's like you're interviewing like the girls and you just hear these really shitty, detuned, fucking sleazy rock riffs that sound like total garbage by today's standards and even the '90s standards. Just so dated, just
I I
so bad.
think I think this album probably does fit in to the 90s. It's a very grungy kind of album as opposed to being like a metal glam album.
Yeah, I could see that.
The big thing with this album is it wasn't just Nikki Sixx writing. John Corabi was actually, helped on every single song, which is different because Vince Neil didn't write shit. Obviously, a big part of that does come from John Corabi is also a guitarist, so he has a lot more to say
Hmm.
musically than Vince Neil does, who's just a singer. I like Power to the Music. It's okay. It's a fine song. Hooligan's Holiday. It's fun. Again, I do like the fact that this whole album does have guitar and rhythm guitar. It makes some interesting harmonies, and
Yeah,
it makes some of the riffs sound a bit more full.
he did the best he could of what he was given. Is my
But
analysis.
but yeah, you're jumping in the '90s when this kind of music started to die off. You jumped in after pretty much the biggest Motley Crue album came out, and you have to follow up Vince Neil, who was kind of in his prime at the time.
I want to go on a bit of a side tangent here. Earlier you said that this is more of a grunge influenced album, right?
Yeah,
I think that's a common trend in a lot of '70s and '80s bands that tried to adapt. Here's the
yeah,
thing about grunge, right? Grunge is a very interesting genre, or I'm not sure if you want to call it a genre or an idiom. Like, grunge is a time and place in a very specific subculture. Here's the thing about grunge. It took me a long time to identify what grunge is, okay? But here's my analysis. You have three elements of grunge. You have rock, metal, punk. Of all
yeah,
grunge bands, you take sprinkles of all three of those and you lean towards one of the directions slightly more than the other, right? Nirvana was more punk and hardcore influenced. Pearl Jam was more rock influenced. Alice in Chains a little bit more metal. So you kind of see like where I'm going with this, right?
yeah,
The reason why grunge worked, the reason why grunge was powerful was because it was legitimately counterculture music, right? It didn't even fit in with the metal crowd. It didn't really fit in with the rock crowd or the punk crowd. It was like this own little like circle that was adjacent to all these other things. So when you're an honest to God rock band or a metal band or a punk band and you try to go grunge, you're going to fuck it up unless you are actually part of those countercultures. And Motley Crue was so far removed from any form of counterculture in the fucking 80s, let alone the 90s, that them trying to have grunge influence is really fucking stupid. It'd be like if earnestly, like, I don't know, like Metallica tomorrow just decide I'm gonna record like a fucking scram style hardcore mathcore release. It would be like really stupid. It would be like really ill advised because of how far they removed they would be from that culture. So when
yeah,
Motley Crue detunes their guitars and tries to add like this sludgy alternative vibe, for a lack of better descriptors, it ends up mixing with their 80s influence in a way that just makes it sound like a bunch of dinosaurs trying to wear like the skin of a human. Like, it's fucking weird. Like if an alien was trying to like replicate rock music, it might stumble upon this sound and like create something like this. It sucks. It's really stupid. It's too glam to be grunge and too grunge to be glam. It has
yeah.
no home.
Fun fact. While we're talking about grunge, do you know who's credited for killing off grunge and bringing rock back?
I don't actually know.
Bon Jovi.
I actually don't know about this. Why do people say that? Or who
I
says that is
don't
a better way of putting it.
No, it was like properly documented. I had to find where I found that
Like, did he have like a
because it's been a
comeback song
long
or
time since I
something?
read that. But yeah, Crush came out in 2000 and it was credited for being like the rock savior from grunge.
Which I find hilarious because like a lot of the radio rock bands of the 2000s still had a shitload of post grunge influence.
Yeah.
Like Chuck Berry was, or Buck Cherry was still like really big at the time. Puddle of Mud was still pushing out big singles, and like Pearl Jam was still doing
Yeah,
their
but Buck
thing.
Cherry were more of like a rap rock group.
Yeah, I guess, yeah, but I mean, like, I don't know.
Like Buck Cherry came out at the right time for being, because obviously rap rock got big
Yeah,
99, 2000, 2001.
yeah. 9/11 music, yeah, just trash.
All right, so I've got an
Yeah, sorry.
album that we're not going to talk about a lot.
No,
Generation
but
Swine.
sorry, I have more to say about I have more to say about this album. Sorry, I
Okay.
really want to rip this album to shreds because I had analysis about my own podcasting. I'm too nice. I'm done, Aaron.
Okay.
I'm done. This album fucking sucks. Listening to this album was an honest to god slog. I have vivid memories of me sitting in the lunchroom at my work, just being like, "Fuck this album, fuck this band, I hate this podcast. I don't know what I'm doing with my life." This was torture to my ears, dude. This is the shit that you make Iraqi prisoners of war listen to when you're trying to interrogate them. This album is music for people who back into parking spots at the local Chick-fil-A. This album sucks. Fuck this album. Fuck this band. This is so bad.
Well, now I want to know what you think about Generation Swine.
Fuck that album. Fuck this band. I think it's
Which one's worse? Because Generation Swine was where
yes.
Vince
Generation
Neil came
Swine
back.
is worse.
Thank you. I'm glad you
Generation
agree.
Swine is worse because Motley Crue, the self-titled album, at least was trying to evolve the Motley Crue formula. Okay, it incorporated some bad elements that didn't blow over. It was very much a product of its time. It was a misstep. It was influenced by drugs and hard feelings. It was just a bad idea all around. But this album is a real kick in my musical dick because not only is it super late to the whole, this dives way more into alternative and grunge territory, way
Yeah.
more than the self-titled. So I kind of overplayed how much that self-titled kind of is grungy. This one really takes a nosedive into that. But the fucking problem is that when Vince Neil came back, they tried to hype it up as like, this is the return to form, man. This is like us reinventing ourselves. We're going to change up our logo. We're changing up our image, man. Like, we're fucking. This is, again, like LA Rockisms. This album sounds like an ashtray. It fucking sucks. Like,
So
yeah, sorry, I'm
here,
ranting. Go ahead.
here, would you like to know what Nikki Sixx had to say about this album?
I think I know what he said, but I want to hear it from you.
So it was about 3 years after the album came out, right?
Aye.
The spin that it got out there that Motley Crue was going to flirt with an alternative sound that we've sold out. Sure, it was experimental, but it wasn't alternative, techno, or dance. So I was a little disappointed at the way it was received. Would
No,
you really call this album experimental?
I would for them.
Sure,
I would for them only because they don't experiment ever.
but
Do you
like,
know what I'm saying? It's like they're not. Motley Crue is never a band that should ever utter the words experiment because that's just not who they are. They're pop musicians for lack of better terms.
sure, it was
You know?
experimental, but it wasn't alternative, techno, or dance. I mean, yeah, I get that. Like, it wasn't a straight up fucking metal album. It obviously wasn't techno or dance, but like, that feels very like the album was bad, and I know it's bad, but I don't want to admit it's bad.
I do. I want to. I okay. So here's Exhibit A, right? If this is a court case, right? Imagine like we're trying to make our case to the jury. Okay.
Yeah.
Issue number one on the Wikipedia article. Sorry, let's start literally top down and work our way down here. Exhibit A, this album cover. What do you think of this album cover, Aaron?
It's 90s. It's a 90s album cover. End of.
Right. That's a good place to start. Very much a product of its time. Fair play. Can't hold that against a brother. Whatever. The image they use is all of them wearing pig masks in suits with an American flag. Okay. you could discern a couple things. Either they're making fun of themselves and saying we're a bunch of pigs. Probably not the case, however. I think what they were trying to do was to like they're trying to like what's the word for it? Project this image of like we're calling out like the big wigs, man. Like we're seeing things a little bit differently. We're the new crew. We're calling it like it is these days, man. Maybe I'm misinterpreting that, but I mean like that's a very, very like if I was to make fun of punk, I would say Generation Swine to refer to like politicians or something like fucking like really cliched like that.
Yeah.
Now let's work our way down slightly more. Exhibit B, recorded 1995 to 1997. I hate that it took 2 years to get this fucking thing out the door. I think
Can
that's
I point out why?
I could imagine why because everyone was infighting. It was a no one wanted to do it.
There was a bit more to it than that.
Let's hear it.
There was a mass firing at Warner Brothers, who owns Elektra.
Yes, I did read about this, but go ahead.
Yep. Yep. So there was a mass firing. They considered getting rid of Motley Crue. Motley Crue was just were not standing up or bringing in the money that they were meant to. They believe it was because of John Corabi. The band actually liked working with John Corabi and wanted to keep working with him. They feel like if they kept working with him, they could have been bigger than they were with Vince Neil. So essentially, they were forced to fire John Corabi. Warner Brothers gave Vince Neil a fuck ton of money to come back, and Vince Neil's solo stuff was not going over very well. And yeah, it led to lawsuits with John Corabi and stuff like that. So there was a lot of infighting between like Vince Neil rejoined the band but refused to talk to anyone. He was basically going through like somebody at Warner Brothers. It was basically playing telephone. I'm not talking to him, so you can tell him that I said this, and then they have to fucking back and forth and all that shit. So yeah, there was all that kind of stuff alongside the fact that they were writing. They started writing and wrote a lot of the album with John Corabi. Then Vince Neil came back, so they had to change up how they wrote the songs because they have a different singer, and the album was written to match John Corabi's voice, as opposed to um, the self-title, which was actually kind of written to match Vince Neil.
Yeah, I can hear
Tommy
that.
Lee was on his way out. Tommy Lee was just sick of everything. Um, yeah, there was just so much stuff going on behind the scenes. If I remember right, Vince Neil recorded his part of this album separately from the band. So they all had to record their shit and then send it off, and then Vince Neil recorded and then had to be sent back because Nikki and Tommy were producers on the album.
Tough break.
Yeah, I think the first, if again, I'm just going off of what I can remember, and I could be off. I don't think I'm completely off, but I'm pretty sure the first time. So they all sat down for a meeting with Warner Brothers, Vince and Nikki and Tommy and Mick Mars. And after that, they didn't see each other again until they went on tour for this album, which is like,
So sad.
come on, y'all are fucking like late 30s.
Which goes to show they should have never done this album. So first of all, yeah, it's like no one wanted to be there.
Yeah.
Well, I mean that in like the in a like a secondhand kind of sense. Like obviously they want to be there in a sense that they want to make money and make records, but they didn't
Vince
want.
Neil didn't want to be there, and
That's
nobody
true.
wanted Vince Neil there. But the label told them you either have Vince Neil or Motley Crue is fucked.
Yeah, dude, this album I could imagine John's voice on this, but I think the result would have been similar. It would have been just a fucking mess, an absolute fucking disaster. I think this album to me is often included on lists of like worst albums of like this genre. I think that's rightfully deserved. I think this album is a real piss take. For me, there are no songs that work. I think every song that comes close to working is because I'm nostalgic for a specific sound, but then it gets fucked up by just poor production choices, really, really whack adaptations of like genres that I've heard before. like I said, man, it's like if an alien tried to replicate rock music, it might fuck up and like stumble upon this idea of rock music. It's so played out, and like I really hate how Motley Crue try to reinvent themselves, but it's so inauthentic, and it's so obviously inauthentic because of like you can tell by how it came out and how quickly they abandoned that image. It wasn't them.
Yeah.
It never was them. And
No.
I think these last two albums really bring up a very interesting ethical art debate about like what constitutes good and bad musicianship. You could probably argue that like both these albums are so fucked, and both these albums are like such a big stain on this band's like resume that I actually sit there and think like, are these actually good musicians, or are they just a bunch of kids who are like really lucky where at the time they had some really sick
Yeah.
riffs and it just kind of like fell into place? Because man, if this
Yeah.
is like your idea of a good album, then you have just poor taste. Just you just don't like read the room. Dude, I listened to this album once and I had to skim through some of the tracks because like here's what I've noticed when I was like going back to this. Like there are other bands I try not to skim albums, right? Because I think that's like a poor way to listen to music, obviously.
Yeah.
However, with these last two albums, what I noticed when I was skimming is that once I heard the verse, once I heard the chorus and the bridge, that's it. What you see is what you get. There are zero surprises on this album. Even songs like Glitter, where they try to have like some synths, like some programmed drum parts, that surprise is not very surprising.
Can
It's
I point out
fucking
something interesting about Glitter?
yeah, okay.
It was help writ. Brian Adams helped write it, both
Yikes.
the lyrics and the music.
Tough
So yeah.
break. Tough break, kiddo. Yeah, dude, I can't get over this album. It really does suck, man. I really like whenever I read like the worst albums ever lists and I stumble upon them, I'm always like, I don't know, how bad can it really be? This one sucks.
It does. It's
It's really
not a
not
good time.
good. Really not a good time. Again, this is album you would make POWs listen to when you're trying to extract information. Just fucking farce. So shitty. It's a huge stain on like rock music. I think like when people say rock music is dead, I imagine they think of this album because what it shows to me, honestly, is that like rock music had a good 30-year window, right? You had the 60s, 70s, and 80s, just strong releases, and
Yeah.
then counterculture took that shit over because rock stopped being counterculture in the 90s when like
Really
death
did.
metal, black metal, all metal, and hardcore started to become a thing. Post punk was more of a thing. Rock music was radio shit.
Yep.
All edge was lost. And so when people, so nowadays, I think this is still evident that rock music, and then when people say rock music is that, I used to debate that and say, well, no. You have bands like Sheer Mag, Alabama Shakes, doing their thing. But I think honestly, part of that is because you have like these really good rock bands fronted by really awesome women. That's more counterculture than anything Motley Crue could ever do in 2022. The
Yeah.
fact that like Alabama Shakes is fronted by like this black woman who like shreds guitar and belts vocals is way more hip than anything any like just straight up normal ass rock band could conjure out. So if rock music is dead, this was like a fucking footnote on that history book, man.
Yeah.
This is a
It
good
was
example how
really the idea.
like rock music as a counterculture died in the 90s,
Yep.
and its death note is still ringing out throughout the generations, man. No one
Yep.
gives a shit. Not even Motley Crue
Yeah.
gave a shit.
Like, yeah, because I mean, this is a very fabricated album. It was basically written and had to be written and approved by the label. There was so much background stuff that didn't even let Motley be Motley at this point. That after Generation Swine, they left Elektra and made their own label,
Yep, they sure did.
and then brought out a new tattoo. And Tommy Lee left, and they had Ozzy's drummer.
They did, yeah. I
Hey,
would.
do you know where the album cover comes from?
I don't. I actually read this earlier, but I actually don't remember what it was.
So Motley Crue toured with Iron Maiden at one point,
Hmm.
and Bruce Dickinson's wife supposedly crawled through a window into Nikki Sixx's hotel room and cheated on Bruce Dickinson with Nikki Sixx. This album cover is making fun of Bruce Dickinson's Tattooed Millionaire cover. So obviously it's just new tattoo. The song is about I have a new tattoo. It's a synonym for sex, just like we talked about earlier. But yeah, Tattoo Millionaire was written about Nikki Sixx fucking his wife, and then Motley Crue just decided to make fun of that.
If I was Bruce Dickinson, I would bomb Motley Crue. I would literally drive at Force One over top of their house and just drop a nuke.
Like, I wonder if he's still mad about this.
I would
Like, I
be.
wonder if he's, yeah, like I wonder if
I
he's
would be.
still bitter.
Dude, I would have
Obviously,
been in
like,
jail for shooting Nikki Six. I would have bought all the guns in the world.
oh
Oh, what a
fuck,
bastard. That sucks.
yeah, like
Wait,
I'm
was this?
pretty sure he's like him and his wife ended up getting a divorce at some
Yeah,
point.
I'd hope so, dude. If my wife ever had sex with Nikki Six, I would actually think less of her. I not because the whole like honestly, she could cheat on me with anyone else. It could be a dentist or a doctor. I'd be like, okay, fine. But Nikki Six, I'd be like, no, that's trash. I hate that. I hate Nikki. Dude, this sucks. So was this '90s Maiden that they toured with?
It would have been 80s, I think.
Okay,
Yeah, because Tattooed Millionaire came out in 1990, so
that sucks that they referenced it 10 years after the fact.
right,
That's really petty
yeah,
and shitty. Just another knock against this awful band. So here's the thing: new tattoo, musically speaking, pretty lame.
yeah.
Pretty lame. Not
It's
as
got
lame
a
as
couple of okay
yeah.
riffs,
A couple
but
riffs are good, I guess. I actually didn't know it was Vince Neil on this album when I was listening to it. I'm like, oh, that voice is familiar. Just sounds like a sleepy Vince Neil.
it's
Sucks.
there's no passion to it.
No. Again, it's also like going back to everything we're saying, or everything I was saying because I was ranting
Yeah,
about rock music. It's just fucking boring by that standards. Why in the year 2000 would I ever listen to that? When I can listen to Rage Against the Machine, when I can listen to Limp Bizkit.
yeah,
Why?
yeah. It's
It's no edge, dude. It's cringe.
here's one thing that I find interesting. It doesn't really have anything to do with the album itself. Um, so when they went on tour for this album, Randy Castillo ended up having to go for surgery,
Mm.
and they got a female drummer
Yeah,
in
that's right.
his place.
It was the whole drummer, wasn't it?
Yeah. Would you trust being a female in this band?
Fuck no.
Like, I
Dude,
know they've obviously gone very chill at this fucking point,
did
but
they?
like,
Didn't
uh,
Tommy Lee go to jail for just beating Pamela Anderson? Isn't that why it wasn't on this
eh,
album?
no, he left the band.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, there's not much to say about this album.
Yeah, it's very forgettable.
It's a very tired album. This is a very tired band. That's why they stopped releasing shit for 8 years.
Yeah, dude, this again is like Exhibit A for why rock music just couldn't keep it together, man. All these legacy bands were just fucking up their own legacy. Dude, Motley Crue straight up should have ended years ago. And I think about that a lot because of the whole saga about them wanting to tour around the time of the pandemic and how their tour got blown off for years. And they said, nah, man, we're gonna play these stadium shows. Don't you worry, fans. You're gonna get your Motley Crue show. And they kept on blowing it off. And then Vince Neil got fat, and everyone was like, no, Vince Neil, you gotta get into shape, man. You gotta stop fucking up your vocals. You gotta get your shit together. And it's just fucking pathetic.
And he's still fucking up his vocals.
Yeah, he's a sad shell of his former self. A very This is Exhibit A for why toxic masculinity exists. This is Exhibit B for why a lot of these guys are in dire need of therapy. Dire need of therapy.
Hey, you know what's edgy?
Hmm.
So it's not technically it's not on this album. It was released at the same time though.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, never mind. Sorry.
They or sorry, the next album, Saints of Los Angeles. It's
Yeah.
not on this. It's not on Saints of Los Angeles, but it was released in the same year. They released a song called "Sex."
I don't even care. Didn't listen to it. Was it bad?
You know what? It's one of the like more Crue songs. It's probably more Crue than anything on Saints of Los Angeles.
Yeah, I could see that. So I kind of would be remiss if I didn't bring this up. This is like peak LA rock. New tattoo, Saints of Los Angeles. Just sounds like a pair of Affliction jeans.
Here's the weirdest
Sucks.
thing. Now, maybe they were understanding that they were a bit tired and everything that they were doing before is kind of overdone. They can't keep doing it, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
But this album has obviously Nikki Sixx writes on all the songs, but they have multiple writers who aren't even in the band on every single song.
I know. Just why?
So they have James Michael, who's in 6 a.m. Obviously, Nikki Sixx's other band,
Mm-hmm.
because very original. They have Marty Frederickson. He just he works with a lot of bands. He he worked with Aerosmith, so you
Right.
would have thought it would have been pretty safe. DJ Ashba, again, he's in 6 a.m.
Really good guitar player. He was also in Guns N' Roses for. Still
That's true, he
isn't
was.
he?
Is he?
I saw him play with Guns N' Roses more than once. I think.
I thought GNR were just straight up back to their OG.
No, they have like three guitars now.
Yeah.
They have like a
No, he left
keyboard player.
he left GNR in 16.
Oh, I see. Yeah, I was gonna say like they're a huge band now. They have like a lot of members on stage.
Yeah.
Not the
Just like
point.
Ghost.
What's that?
But yeah. Yeah, I said just like Ghost.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Ash was not credited on this album technically, but he played rhythm guitar through it.
He's really good.
So I mean I
I
think
like his
they
playing.
learned that like the whole rhythm guitar, lead guitar section of um the self-titled kind of worked out well.
Mm-hmm.
But and then they wanted to make a glam album that was that, but they didn't. Instead they released Saints of Los Angeles.
Here's the thing: glam music is a very flawed genre for a lot of reasons. But I think the number one reason why it's flawed in my mind is that like the most successful glam bands today are just bands that make fun of it.
Yeah.
Literally, Steel Panther's whole stick is taking the piss out of that genre, and they do
And
it infinitely better. Like I'm actually not a Steel Panther guy. I think their music's really kind of lame and not funny, but the guys can shred, dude. I'll take Steel
yeah.
Panther over anything that Motley Crue could ever try to do. I'll take Steel Panther over any classic glam release. No, that's a lie. I'd rather listen to Poison, but cuts from the same cloth, I suppose.
You know what's interesting? So obviously Motley Crue went out on tour for this album because that's what bands are meant to do. They went out on tour with Hinder, Theory of a Dead Man, and The Last Vegas.
Doesn't surprise me, honestly, because all these bands are getting like major radio play at the same time, and like a lot of those bands that you mentioned, they have a bit of that like poppy glam influence, anyways. They're very like anthemy hooky kind of bands, and like don't get me wrong, Motley Crue is definitely the most old school of all those bands you just like named off, but who cares, right? If you think about the audience who would have gone to that tour, sure as shit wasn't young people. It would have been like boomers bringing their kids along. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I find the reviews for this to be interesting as well.
Yeah, it was kind of mixed, but more towards the favorable side. I've noticed.
Yeah, because like okay, so Metacritic, which takes the score of all like professional reviews, and then just gives you an aggregate score. If so, it's 54 on Metacritic out of 100. That's not
Mm-hmm.
good. All Music has a 3 out of 5. That's pretty meh. Billboard says it was favorable, but Billboard will give a favorable score to anything that charts high.
Mm-hmm.
But then you have like Music Review, who gave it 90 out of 100.
Yeah.
Like it's a very middle of the road album, but then you have like these random reviews that are very good.
Nostalgia is one hell of a
Like,
drug, dude.
yeah, it's weird. But
Classic
yeah,
example of a
it's a meh album.
it's a pretty boring album. I think it's less worse than everything else on this discography, but I mean like it's fucking dude, it's like a again dinosaurs, man. It's so boring. So
Yeah.
like a sham of its formal self, a shell of its former
Imagine
self.
imagine in 2008 releasing a song called Motherfucker of the Year
I couldn't.
and Chicks Equal Trouble
Yikes. And also
and White Trash Circus.
The whole Saints of Los Angeles thing. This album is like a low key whatchamacallit. I believe they refer to it almost like a concept album where it's basically like their autobiography, so to speak. And Saints of Los Angeles is their anthem. And like I was saying many moons ago or many albums ago, that like there's a lot of ego floating around. Referring to yourself as the Saint of Los Angeles, pretty egotistical.
Yeah,
You have to be a real jerk to consider yourself the Saint of Los Angeles when like I don't know Lemmy used to live there.
yeah, exactly.
There's like
Yeah, it
way,
was.
you know,
Yeah, I was just gonna say it was originally going to be called The Dirt, which is obviously their biography, book thing, movie, whatever you want,
it's all of those
whichever one
things.
you did. And then yeah, it's each song is meant to be a mini story.
This is a classic example of a band that tainted its own legacy through just
Yeah,
sheer misfires. Really bad at reading the room, really bad at adapting the times, and very questionable musicianship. Which I hate to say. I really hate to like downplay people's musicianship because I think it's a really low blow to tell someone that their art's invalid. But holy fuck, dude. These guys really just if art was a person, they all just gang beat this person into a pulp. There is no
they,
integrity on a singular ounce of this later half of this discography.
they shot themselves in the foot and then continued to do it over and over again.
I mean, they just amputated their legs. Never mind shooting shooting their feet. This album
All right.
makes me want to cry. This discography is generally pretty shit. Like it makes me never want to listen to the Crew ever again. I've gotten my fill. I never want to think about this band ever again, in spite of liking their first like 5 albums. I just don't care. Can't be bothered to care. There's so much new music happening these days. So many interesting musical movements. I never want to give Motley Crue a red cent. Fuck this band. But yeah, the first 5 albums are good. So if you guys want to listen to that, it's good shit.
Anyways, thanks for listening
That's my closing
because
thought.
yeah, you get the closing thought on this one. Thanks for listening. It's been an episode. I Marcus is sad, but it's fine because the next one is a band he picked.
It's not going to make you any happier.
Oh, good.
It's very topical. Let's
It
just
is.
say it's a band that's long overdue for an episode.
Yeah. Anyways, yeah, if you're listening to this on the things like the Spotify's and the Apples, review it. Give us 5 stars
Only
or
5-star reviews or one
whatever
stars.
system. Don't 1 star us. If you want to give us 1 star, just don't give us any stars. Just don't review.
How about this, guys? For the reviews on iTunes, I need you to just write a review of your least favorite Motley Crue record, and that's the
Do it.
review for this podcast. Yeah.
Do it. Anyways, hi Marcus. Bye Marcus. I'm sorry.
Toodles.
This was my fault.
It's okay. It's not as bad as Avenged Sevenfold. No, yeah,
Oh,
this is worse. I take that back. I'm
yeah,
sorry.
yeah,
I didn't
right?
mean
Like, what
that.
are you on about?
Yeah. Follow us on the grams, the Facebooks at Deep Dive Discography. Aaron, what's the website name for our Patreon? What's our link called? I should link this actually.
www.patreon.com/deep dive discog.
Please give us money.
Yeah, at least sub to our YouTube so we can start monetizing that.
We'll get there.
Goodbye.